2012. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Graham Mejia.
Here.
Councilmember Kusamoto.
Here.
Councilmember Stevens.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Poe.
Present.
Mayor Edgar.
Here. Next, we're going to have everybody rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. It's going to be led by myself, and then I'd ask everybody to please stay standing for the invocation by Councilmember Stevens. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you would, please bow your heads. Heavenly Father, tonight we ask you for the protection of our residents and guidance for all of our residents, especially the ones that possibly may be out of jobs or out of work right now. We ask for your grace and guidance for all of our family members in uniform. And we ask you to guide us tonight through the business of doing the business of the city. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Just getting right into this, we're going to start off with the presentation. And I would just ask council join me down by the podium. And we're going to be basically giving a presentation to Meg Cutuli, who's the president of LaSalle Unified School District School Board for the Career and Technical Education Month. Alrighty. Sure this is on. So what we want to do this evening is we'd like to give you a commendation, and what I'd like to do is to maybe have you help educate the community a little bit by talking a little bit about this, and I know you can. So with that, what I'd like to do is just turn that over to you, and then I'll give you this.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. February is going to be, Los Alamitos City is declaring it to be Career Technical Education Month. I also serve on the North Orange County Regional Occupation Program Board, which is our career technical part of our school district. It's a consortium with 5 school districts, including LaSalle. And February is Career Technical Ed Month. We truly believe that every student, whether they're college-bound or going to go directly into the workforce or to the military, need to be educated in career technical education. We teach resume writing, portfolio building, how to act on an interview, how to present yourself, besides very specific skills. ROP classes are usually opened up for juniors and seniors. We usually don't want our freshmen and sophomores to be taking those classes until they kind of know until they realize they really have a future out of high school and need to do something about it. So they're usually for the juniors and seniors. We last year had over 850 students at LaSalle High School who were in career technical education classes. And now I'm going to read the ones that we have, because I think this is what is surprising to a lot of people, to think that on our campus we do have all these courses. And they do include video production, accounting occupations, entrepreneurship, careers with children, preschool lab. We do have a preschool on campus. Wonderful. You're on one-to-one with the students with your student. Introduction to fire technology, child development, emergency medical responder, health fitness, sports medicine, construction occupations, computer aided design, principles of engineering, together with the introduction of engineering design, which are a combined class so that you get the people who have the concept of engineering with the people who have the manual dexterity to produce the products. And it's called Project Lead the Way. We have all of those classes on our campus, and we're just really proud that you guys are recognizing the importance and value that these classes have. So thank you so much.
So everybody is very thankful for everything that you do on the school board, and you guys are doing such a great job with all the financial difficulties and everything that you've been able to do to navigate. I'd also say that on behalf of the city, there's a lot of different paths. You always hear about the high API score. You hear about all the kids going on to college. I have 3 boys that have made their way through LaSalle High, and this type of program for folks that aren't necessarily going the traditional college route, it's very important that a school like ours has this sort of capability and provides this service to our students. So from all of us on the City Council, I just want to say thank you, and I'd just like to give you this commendation.
Thank you so much.
All right, next up, we're going to go ahead and open up to oral communication. At this time, anybody in the audience can come forward and speak on any item within the jurisdiction of City Council. Remarks are to be limited to no more than 5 minutes. And at this point, Clerk, do we have anybody that submitted any requests at this point? Okay, anybody? Come.
Mayor and members of the City Council, my name is Art DeBolt. I'm with the Citizens for a Fair Trash Contract. Mr. Edgar, Councilmember Edgar, recently announced publicly that settlement discussions regarding the trash lawsuit were at, quote, an impasse. In view of that public pronouncement by Mr. Edgar, Citizens for a Fair Trash Contract make the following settlement offer. The city and CDS accept the city and Consolidated Disposal Services accept the issued writ, i.e. the city or Consolidated both dismiss with prejudice their appeals of Judge Banks' ruling, and the city agrees to comply with the writ as issued. Number 2, the citizens will dismiss its appeal of the trial court's order granting Poe, Edgar, and Stevens anti-SLAPP motion. Poe, Edgar, and Stevens will waive any claim for attorney's fees or costs against the citizens for a fair trash contract. The city and Consolidated Disposal Services combine in whatever way they agree upon to pay the citizens' attorney's fees and costs in the amount of $300,000. Finally, customary mutual general releases with the exception of enforcing the current writ. And I'll add to that, it's our request that further settlement discussions regarding this dispute be conducted in public for the benefit of the city and for the benefit of everyone involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeBolt. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and move on. Next. Okay.
Hi, my name is Jody Schloss, resident of Los Alamitos, and I'd like to talk. I'm just going to read this. Mayor, members of the City Council, I am disappointed with the conduct of Council members Edgar, Poe, and Stevens as you launched a frenzied investigative witch hunt into the alleged violation by Council member Warren Kuzumoto of the Brown Act. Listening to the comments of former Council members Chuck Sylvia, the witch hunt will be followed by a burning at the stake, lest any future council member question the actions of this majority. While I'm not an attorney, I have read the Brown Act, and I would like to draw the city attorney and the council's attention to what appears to me Brown Act violations by council members Edgar, Poe, and Stevens, violations that I feel are binary. On December 8th, 2011, council members Edgar and Stevens entered into a closed session at City Hall. Councilmember Poe was out of state at the time, and a teleconference meeting was held. The Brown Act states in Section 54953B3, during the teleconference, at least a quorum of the members of the legislative body shall participate from locations within the boundaries of the territory over which the local agency exercises jurisdiction. According to our charter, a majority of the then members of the council shall constitute a quorum for the transaction of business at any meeting. The number of council members on the Los Alamitos City Council is currently 5, thus a quorum would be a minimum of 3 council members. It would appear the December 8th, 2011 council meeting was in violation of the Brown Act. Further, according to the Brown Act, any decisions from that meeting would be null and void. The reported action from that meeting was to direct the city attorney to file a notice of appeal and attempt settlement. On December 5th, the closed session was convened at 8:48 p.m. and ended at 11:43 p.m. In attendance at the City Hall were only council members Edgar and Stevens. Again, the Brown Act requires a quorum of council members to be in attendance. It would appear again this meeting with only 2 members in attendance is another Brown Act violation. I would like to see these possible Brown Act violations by Councilmember Edgar, Poe, and Stevens investigated with the same degree of urgency as alleged violations of Councilmember Kusamoto. That's all I have for that, and I have copies of this for the city clerk and council members, so I'll pass them over. As soon as I finish, I have one more item if I have time. It looks like I do. I have a complaint about Consolidated Disposal Services. They broke my trash can on January 19th, and I don't know, maybe there's somebody up there that could help me with this. They broke my trash can when they picked up the trash on the 19th, and I called them that day, and they were very polite and friendly, and they said they would pick up the broken trash can and deliver a new one on the 26th, which is exactly the next Thursday, on regular scheduled pickup day. They did not do that. So I called them that afternoon, and they said, oh, whoops, we'll pick it up tomorrow on the 27th, Friday. They didn't do that either, so I called them back, and they said, no, they didn't pick it up on Friday, but I kept waiting because I thought, oh, maybe they're just running late. So I called them on Monday, and they said, oh, I don't know why anybody told you they'd bring you another trash can because the trash cans are on back order, and we're going to have to call you and let you know when it's going to happen. And so I said, okay. So I put the trash can back behind the gate, and then a few days later, a trash can was delivered, a refurbished trash can was delivered to my neighbor. And luckily, I had spoken to my neighbor about it one day when we were taking trash out, you know, that it was broken and all that. So the neighbor called me and said, I think I might have your trash can. I'm like, well, but they were supposed to call me so I could put the can back out and they would get exchange cans, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so that never happened. I do now have a refurbished trash can, but I still have the broken trash can, which I have put out. I am not spending it. I've talked to several nice ladies at Consolidated. They're very polite, but I still have the problem. So I just want to let you know, because I do not want code enforcement to come by and ticket me because you're not supposed to be leaving your trash can out, but they have no way of getting it. I locked my gate. So I'm leaving it out. I haven't heard from them, and I'm not calling back. I've spent way too much time on the phone calling these people. It's been like 5 phone calls. So if you could help me with that, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Sloss. Next up.
My name is Ralph Bacher, and I'm a resident of Rossmoor Highlands. My issue is very small, but I was hoping to bring it before the council. When we first got the traffic light heading south on Los Alamitos Boulevard, turning left on Rossmoor Way, there was a fair amount of citizens in our track that were upset about it. They didn't want to wait the extra time, but the traffic light was timed very well, almost in our favor, so we weren't upset. But we've noticed over the last couple of years it's switched to, if we're turning left into our tract, it doesn't matter who gets there first, people coming out of Rossmoor, coming north on Los Al Boulevard, or us, everybody goes first before us, and us turning left, it seems like we get the short end of the stick turning left, and it seems like we're waiting there sometimes. I don't know, but it seems like 2 or 3 minutes sometimes, and there's nobody at any of the intersections. So I don't know if that could be addressed. I know a lot of my neighbors are upset about it, but I'd appreciate any help you guys could give me, and I respect and know you're, most of you here, and appreciate all the help you can give us. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Javier Mejia, resident in Los Alamitos. I just wanted to revisit a couple of items I brought before the Council several months earlier. I'd like to find out where we are with the traffic signal at Humboldt and Cerritos, still in disrepair. I'd like to find out what's going on with that. Last we heard might have been going out to bid. It has been seemingly a sufficient amount of time to get that item resolved. I'd like to find out once again about the graffiti abatement plan for the city. I see throughout the city, up and down Cutuli, Cerritos, Los Al Boulevard, on many of the signal poles, you'll see what looks to be patchwork light gray paint over an anodized pole. And I know that there are a lot of graffiti removal products out there that are very effective at removing the graffiti rather than patchworking over. If you drive through Los Angeles, you'll see what looks to be quilting on every pole, sidewalk, street, fence, everything, and that's what's coming. If we don't remove the graffiti, we're going to have every different color of gray patchwork across the city, and I, for one, would like to keep the city looking as nice as possible for the future. I'd like to find out if the item on, northbound Los Alamitos Boulevard between Cutuli and Cerritos, there's a couple of right turn-only lanes there. As you're proceeding north past Hoff's Hut, that lane ends its right turn. And I brought it forward last time. Cars were usurping that right turn, and they're using it as an acceleration lane to pass the traffic there. And I know over the Christmas holiday, I was stopped over there, and there was a traffic collision right there at that intersection. And I'm guessing there have been more. I've seen the cars that go through there, and I mean, you hear them revving up and take off. It's like they're getting on the freeway, you know. But I'd like to find out if that's gone to the Traffic Commission or if that's going to be resolved somewhere else. But I think that's a safety issue that's in dire need of some attention. And then I saw that there were some limit lines added to the alleyways. Looked like some limit lines on the ends of the alleyways and maybe an additional sign. Is there any more movement with regard to speed bumps in the alleyways, or is that project finished? Or do we decide to go on more alleys, or where we are with that project? I'd just like to find out what's going on. Thank you very much.
Javier, can I just ask you a question? So for the community's benefit, you're married to Jerry. I'm just curious, have you talked to Jerry at all about any of these, or
No.
is there a reason why you need to be able to come here if you're not getting the answers? Or I'm just trying to figure out, because I think these are items that you've talked about, and I just want to make sure what other avenue, the Traffic Commission, I think some of these things have made it down there, so I was just kind of curious.
Okay, I haven't talked to her. I really try to keep her, I don't take my questions to her as much as possible, and I hadn't heard anything come back to the council, and I thought that's kind of what the steps were going back about a year ago, that items brought forward were going to be addressed, hopefully here. I didn't go to any of the Traffic Commission meetings, although I can do that, but I haven't heard any response on those, so that's why I'm following up here.
Not a problem.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any
And if
other
I
public
may-
comment? Sure, Jerry, go ahead.
Just with regards to that, even if he and I did speak about it, there are other people in the community that are interested in the outcome of those. So if we have items that are brought forward by residents, maybe we can take just a few minutes to address those when they're completed, so that whether a few people know about it or not, the public at large has the answer if they have those similar concerns. Just maybe something we want to implement as we go.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions or any other remarks? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move it on. Next up is Register of Major Expenditures. Do I have a motion for that?
I'll motion approval.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Graham Mejia,
Aye.
Councilmember Kusamoto,
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Poe,
Aye.
Mayor Edgar.
Aye. Next up is the consent calendar. All items on the consent calendar can be moved by one motion unless, say, council member wants to pull and to talk about it. Is there anybody want to pull any of these items?
Mayor, I'd like to pull the meeting minutes and make a motion to move the remainder.
Thank you, Jerry.
I'd like to pull 8C and 8D.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Anybody else?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and just approve item B and F. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next, item A, Jerry, approval of minutes.
Yes, I actually have a question with regards to procedure. We had a resident who stood up out of turn and spoke regarding something I was speaking on during the council meeting. And I'm just wondering if that person is speaking out of order, City Attorney, is that information that's included in the minutes?
Jerry, what date is that, just so I
I'm
can...
sorry, that is for January 17th, page 6, third paragraph down. Because my concern is, just before you address it, that we don't generally have people jumping up in the audience when the proper time to speak has already passed, and blurting out their concerns. So I'm just wondering, if this was done out of order, is it to be included in the minutes?
There's no legal rule as to what needs to be included in the minutes or not included in the minutes. It's the city council's discretion as to what gets recorded, other than typically the action items themselves. Any motions that are made are recorded in the minutes. Beyond that, it's up to the city council.
Okay, so Mayor, I just want to, I want to go on record that if we're going to allow that, I think that we're starting a real slippery slope with these meetings going downhill, people just jumping up whenever they want to speak. With regards to that issue, I'm good with that answer, and I will go ahead and state for the record, Wendy, my concern that I do each meeting, that the council minutes in the format that they are not inclusive of important information that needs to be documented with regards to city council action, both for historical and legal reasons. And if you could note that for the minutes, and then I'll go ahead and pass it back to you, Mayor.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else have any comments on item A?
Yes, I do.
Sure, go ahead.
On the regular meeting minutes on page 19, the fourth paragraph from the bottom, I believe it should read, Mayor Edgar opened the discussion for the Orange County Fire Authority. It says transportation fire.
Oh, okay.
I think that.
Sorry, yeah, I can't find that either, I'm sorry.
On page 9
Oh, 9, 19.
of the regular meeting minutes, fourth
Okay.
paragraph from the bottom, Orange County Fire Authority.
Okay,
Okay. And with that, I will move approval of
okay. Do I have
all
a...
three of the minutes.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, what was the change, Marilyn?
It's Orange County, it says Orange County Transportation Fire. It should be Orange County Fire Authority.
Okay, okay.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Objection?
No.
No.
Okay, 3-2. Next item, item C, emergency roof repairs. Councilmember Stevens.
Yes, I was just curious, are we using the same contractor that we did for the original repair? Because
No,
it seems,
this is an insurance recommended contractor that we're using this time. It's during the last 5 weeks though, so that's the same contractor, yes.
okay.
During these, since we first approved this a few weeks ago.
So we're going a little more extensive this time, as opposed to just sort of a patch before?
No, this is a repair. This isn't a complete tear off of the roof and replacement of complete roofs. This is a repair job to conducted based on insurance claim that we have filed with our insurance agent. It's both for the police building and the community center
Right.
building, and it includes air conditioning repair on the community center building.
Yeah, well, my concern was that it was the community center, and I know the police building also had some water damage too. The interior damage that was done, is that also covered by the insurance too?
That will not proceed though until we repair the air conditioner at the community center, and then that roof is tested with a rain. We can now proceed to the interior of the police department because the police department weathered the last storm.
All right, good. All right. Just needed clarification on that, and with that, I'll move that item.
Okay. I'll second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Alrighty. Item 8D, race on the base equipment rental. Councilmember Stevens.
Just a quick question on that one, and it goes into a lot of detail. And I know that we are also added as an additional insured by the contractor that's coming in there. And I'm just curious, have we received a copy of that? We have?
Yes, we have both the certificate of liability insurance as well as the additional insured endorsement.
All right, so this is covering not only their employees, but also our employees too,
Correct, as well as the military.
and volunteers.
Correct.
That's all I needed to know. Thank you. With that, I'll move that item.
All right, do I have a second?
A second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. We're going to move on to discussion items 9A.
I think you have not yet taken action on 8E. I didn't hear anyone pull it, but when you announced the motion, the first motion, you said 8B and F. So we need to pick up 8E somehow.
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. This time we're serious. We're going to go to item 9A, council update regarding issues in neighboring Seal Beach. City manager.
I'm going to let Steve Mendoza give this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Council had recently requested an update on 3 developments in the city of Seal Beach. The first item was the change at Seal Beach Boulevard at St. Cloud. The second item is the new retailers coming to the area. And third and finally is the draft housing element, which is proposing housing units behind Sprouts. And I'm going to describe each of those occurrences. The recently reconstructed intersection of Seal Beach Boulevard at St. Cloud now has 2 left-hand turn lanes. The double left has been planned in the city of Seal Beach since 2004. And grant funds were at risk recently of being lost, and they had to finish that project before Christmas. And the project is not related to new retailers. It's something that was in their capital improvement plan for a number of years, and grant money's attached to it. The second item is the announcement of several retailers coming to the shops at Rossmoor. One is Rite Aid, In-N-Out Burger, Babies R Us, Toys R Us combination, 1 store. And there will be changes to the Stats building. The Rite Aid building replaces the demolished Chevron, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and Verizon. The In-N-Out Burger is nearly complete between Marie Callender's and Chipotle restaurant. The Toys R Us, Babies R Us combination replaces the previously demolished hardware store and the grocery store from many years ago next to Kohl's. And the soon-to-be vacant Stats will undergo a transformation which will transform it into 3 retail storefronts, one being a pet retailer, the other being an office supply retailer, and the third one is yet to be determined. There is a site plan included with your staff report that shows some of the locations of these. Regarding the traffic related to those retailers, in 2006, there were lengthy discussions between the 2 communities' mayors, the mayor of Seal Beach and the mayor of Los Alamitos, regarding the impacts related to the shops at Rossmoor. And discussions led to a traffic study at that time. The conclusions of the traffic study resulted in no further action by the city of Los Alamitos regarding the shops at Rossmoor's eventual build-out. The third item that has caused some issue for some residents is the Seal Beach housing element. Seal Beach has released their draft 2008 through 2014 housing element, and it introduces a 1-acre site proposed to be housing behind Sprouts within the shops at Rossmoor. And that is in order to meet their housing obligations required by the state. They have to develop a document that demonstrates where housing could be built. And Seal Beach has thus far selected that site as where it could be built, and it's been drafted into their housing element. Now their housing element is being circulated from committee to committee within the city of Seal Beach, and also a draft version has been sent up to the state for early comments, much like this city council did with our last housing element. Although the Seal Beach is trying to establish this area to meet their housing obligations, the area is still zoned commercial. And furthermore, no developer has proposed residential units at the site. The development of housing units on the site has not been considered previously. It would be a change in the traffic impacts to the area and could potentially be an increase of traffic. Those traffic-related issues weren't studied in the 2006 traffic study. Recent outreach we've had between the City of Seal Beach staff regarding these 3 topics has resulted in new dialogue between the city managers, and this is a positive step. This dialogue will lead to an improved understanding of common issues between the two communities and improved delivery of information to the respective council members as well. And staff's going to continue to closely monitor these 3 developments in that city and provide our city council with any updates as they come along. But that's kind of a short synopsis of what's going on in Seal Beach. I hope we've kind of wrapped that up in a nice package for you.
Okay. I'm going to bring that back to the council, but before I do, anybody in the audience like to make any public comment on this item specifically? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to bring that back and open it up to the council. Anybody have any questions for staff or make comments?
I do.
Okay, go ahead. Member Stevens.
When will the rezoning happen? Do we have any idea on that in reference to the housing element?
Well, if the housing element goes as far as it is with the committee, it would end up to the Planning Commission and then be proposed for a change of within a year. Their housing element has a goal to rezone the property within a year of the housing element being adopted. But there's been some discussions between the city managers where they're going to redo some traffic work and maybe look at some other selected sites within their community prior to finalizing their housing element document.
Okay, other selected sites, does that mean within that development right there or in a different area in the city of Seal Beach?
Councilmember Stevens, we don't want to get too far out ahead of the Seal Beach Council at sharing information, but I think I can safely say that they are looking at alternative sites all over Seal Beach, not just in the shops at Rossmoor.
All right. My 2 concerns. One of them is that if they don't go in with the housing element, then that leaves more property to be developed into commercial. And the other part of it would be if it does go into a housing element, the impact of the additional traffic on Los Alamitos Boulevard and also possibly children using the school district too. And so we've got a double impact, I think, that has to be addressed, as time goes on, depending upon what their decisions are. Again, not rolling the ball out ahead of them.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. We are in a wait-and-see phase, and this will, the purpose of this update and subsequent updates is to provide information to you as quickly as we can get it.
All right. My other understanding was that the housing element was also contingent upon the development within there. Without the housing element, somewhere I read that the developer wouldn't be allowed to continue on doing the commercial? Or
No.
was it a block grant or something that they were dealing with?
No, there would be no relationship to the amount of commercial related to the housing element getting approved. There is a freeze on grants if you don't have approved housing element.
That's
Where the grants are within the city of Seal Beach is not necessarily related to the shops at Rossmoor.
All right.
So it's not tied to the amount of commercial, but you're right. Federal funding and the trickle down and getting approved for various grants, many times the first requirement they look at is, does the city have an approved housing element?
All right. Again, I don't want to get ahead of the Seal Beach City Council on that, but again, this is something that has a direct impact on our community. And I'm also hoping that we work fairly close with the community of Rossmoor too during this, because I think it's also going to have sort of in their front yard, more so than anything else. City Manager?
That definitely goes without saying.
Okay.
We will work with all the communities that it impacts.
Very good. All right, that's all I had. Thank you.
Councilmember Mejia.
Thank you. Councilmember Stevens touched on what I was going to ask. In these new dialogues with these meetings with the city managers, are you going to be including the general manager of the RCSD from Rossmoor? Being that they're directly affected, is he going to be in the meetings with you and the other city manager from Seal Beach?
Well, thus far, it's just been a dialogue because it's Seal Beach property.
Right.
But as developments occur, most certainly.
Yeah. And the only reason I ask is because, for those of you who don't know, Rossmoor was put into our sphere of influence some time ago. And unfortunately, what affects them also affects us because we share that common street of Seal Beach Boulevard. I know we've had residents who have come forward and complained about the traffic, and I'm glad, Mayor, that you addressed this so expeditiously. I'm glad to hear that Rossmoor is looking for additional sites. One thing, Mr. Mendoza, can you explain what happens? Now, I don't know if I have this correct, but when you do your housing element, just because you say that this is the site where you could put some low-income housing, it doesn't mean you're compelled to do so. Is that correct?
Well, the state is getting a little more enforcement active in that aspect. They want to see goals within your housing element of when you will meet these established goals. They want to see a plan of action, much like a general plan has a plan of action on it. It's an implementation plan that's usually included in the back of every housing element.
Right. What I had heard, and I don't think it was from you, but it was one of the meetings or something that I was at, that it's not something that's real heavily enforced. So what you're saying now is they're getting a little stricter with what they're looking to do with compliance with this?
They are. The state wants to know that your housing units are likely.
I get that. Okay. Just like to say thank you to the City of Seal Beach for taking into consideration how this will affect the community of Rossmoor and Los Alamitos, and appreciate any efforts you can make to mitigate the impacts that this has had on our community. And with that, I believe that's all I have, Mayor.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Poe.
Yes, thank you, Stephen and staff, for putting this together. You know, we're so closely aligned down the boulevard there that, as has been said, anything that happens at the other end affects us. And I've had residents from the Highlands make a comment to me that, isn't there anything you can do? Because it's getting more and more difficult for them to get out. I mean, they're glad that they have the lights there so that they can get out of their track, but the traffic is just become a real nightmare in that area. I think it's real interesting that the survey done in 2006, is there any indication that the kind of I don't want to use the word redevelopment because it's not redevelopment, but the change out in the different retailers in 2006, and we're now 2012. These, I think it was a different owner. I don't believe that these retailers were even in that mix. So I find it really interesting that they didn't feel compelled to do another traffic study.
Well, without coming off too sympathetic to a neighboring city, I want to state that traffic engineers take a look at traffic for square footages of a retail use.
Okay.
We don't often paint a picture of whether it's stats or a pet store.
Okay.
It's the square footage of the retail that's going up there.
Okay.
There will be different considerations for office, industrial uses, things like that. A grocery store has a different makeup to it than a mall would. But there's very little difference between a stats and the type of retailer that are coming in when it comes to pure square footage.
Okay. And concerning the double left turn lane, I've had several residents in Rossmoor tell me that they're glad that this has come because they don't have to queue up so long to get into their home. And I know that there's been a pro and con to that. But I guess I would have to say that part of being in the county is that you're just not real well informed as to the different projects that are happening around you. And this was on the book since 2004, so you can understand them wanting to do that. And as far as the housing element, I'm glad to hear that they're looking at some other sites because not only for Rossmoor, but particularly for our community, especially the Highlands area, the impact with traffic and so on would be very heavy for them. So thank you very much for the report, and it's good to know that we're in a good dialogue.
Great.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cusimano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Stephen, I have a few questions on this. So, on Seal Beach's plan, so it's been in their books for some time, so kind of their general plan. Now, have we taken that into consideration as we do our general plan update, since Rossmoor is in our sphere of influence?
Absolutely. When we start the environmental impact report for our general plan, it'll take in consideration for cumulative impacts. And those interviews with those community leaders in both Seal Beach and Cypress will take into their projects that are proposed and projects that have previously been approved.
So, okay, so there's cumulative, so since the general plan of whatever their Seal Beach's general plan had been established, that's a growing, changing, evolving, living thing. And ours certainly would be the same thing, but ours right now is going in for the update.
Right.
So cumulative plus future type of growth that's being looked at for our general plan?
Absolutely.
Including the sphere of influence for Rossmoor?
Yeah.
Okay, and then that includes the traffic study as well?
The traffic study for the entire general plan, which will go citywide, will include cumulative impacts of properties outside of our city, including Seal Beach, including the changes in the 405 and the 22, including what's going on in Cypress, yes.
Okay.
Wine Gardens even.
Okay, and then I recall when the hospital issue came up last year, in my mind, the equivalency of traffic impact of the hospital was equivalent to 4 In-N-Out burgers in terms of the traffic. That was kind of, that would be the traffic impact. So I find it hard to believe. I'll kind of echo Mayor Pro Tem Poe's, sentiment about the traffic study. I don't imagine they considered an In-N-Out burger in that.
But they did consider restaurants and square footage. The In-N-Outs are a little different in that they have circulation issues, not necessarily traffic issues. The traffic scientists change the two. They use the different terms separately.
Maybe you can explain that for us then, circulation versus traffic?
Most In-N-Outs are designed with driveways right from a street. And their traffic backs up from their drive-through onto the street and goes down several blocks. You'll see them in many In-N-Outs that have been built in the 80s, 90s, and most recently. This one, you can't enter into the In-N-Out property until after you go deep into the shopping center for once. This is the first time we've seen this. So this is one of the better designed In-N-Out burgers that we've seen on paper.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you,
Great.
Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So I think that the message back to the community is that this is an item that this entire council has embraced and said, hey, there's a lot of people talking about it. There's a lot of people talking about it, obviously in Rossmoor, but also within the Rossmoor Highland area, anybody that drives up and down that street. So what was important, I think, for the council, there's really 3 big items just to kind of summarize this. Because I think that the headline of this is we needed to make sure that we effectively use our ability to influence when we need to, and we need to be really a good neighbor and try to be and coordinate with neighboring cities and help when we can. And this is a situation where we knew there was 3 items that we needed to take a look at. The shops at Rossmoor, some of the people thought if we get out there now and actively make a stink of somehow they'll stop the construction on the In-N-Out and do everything else, or we'll protest the fact that they're putting in stores to show we dislike it. Message to the community on that one is, regardless of whether everybody understood, that ship sailed long ago, and at this point there's really no use in using our influence as a city to make a bigger deal about what goes on at the shops in Rossmoor. On that issue, well, I'll leave that one. The next one, the low-income housing, we truly have an opportunity to influence, but by the good work of Angie Avery and Jill Ingram over there at the city manager level, they've talked. This thing is still in commission, in an ad hoc committee. The Seal Beach City Council has not made any determination. I think by this more proactive action by this council and the actions by Angie, what Seal Beach recognizes is we are watching, and we would really appreciate you consider what our input. And I think that they've been more than happy to take that into consideration. I've personally met with Mayor Levitt, Mayor Pro Tem Miller. We've had discussions. I told him this was on the agenda tonight, so there was no fear of what the heck are you guys doing. I wanted him to be very clear that our community expects us to pay attention to this. We are. We also understand that the housing element is something that for most of the council members there, obviously they're not voting on it yet, but the folks that I've talked to said that, look, Troy, we're really open to whatever this committee recommends, and the committee is told through Angie and Jill that they're open to other sites in the city. To cap that off with those two items, the owner and the previous owner of that shop development was courteous enough to pay a visit to City Hall, met with Steve, myself, and Angie, and we went through this. Imagine this, you're an owner, you've just bought the shops in Rossmoor property, and the city would decide that they want to put a affordable housing on your property. You know, the owner of that had a very visceral reaction, which is, we do not want to have low-income housing on this prime piece of property we bought. We will fight it tooth and nail. He told the same thing to Mayor Levitt. He's told the same thing to Rossmoor. And so the owners of the property are an important consideration. One of the things that Councilmember Kusamoto brought up with, you know, procedurally, what is the RENA or the low-income housing requirement? It's inevitable. It just doesn't need to be on that site. And the fact that they're looking other places, I think that as a city, we feel comfortable. And as a recommendation from this city council, we just are going to opt to, instead of send off letters and try to be an irritant, we're going to continue to stay focused with Angie and Jill and more constructively manage that relationship and hope that they find a better site. The last item that we had to talk about, I said there was three. The last one was circulation. And like Marilyn had said, you know, a lot of folks, mainly in Rossmoor, are calling us saying, hey, look, you know, I'm supportive of that or I'm not. Those are some of the comments that I've heard. People in the Rossmoor Highlands are very supportive because they feel it makes the circulation better for that intersection. None of us up here are traffic engineers, so what we've agreed to do, again, is continue to work with Angie through that process as they go through that. And again, I think the message to the community is the council's watching, they're paying attention, they're engaged constructively in this process, and when it's time to fight, if we had to, we would. This isn't one of those times, and I hope that there's no other questions on this. I'd like to go ahead and just move forward, and I think this is more of a receive and file. Okay. Any other comments from the council before we move on? Okay. We're going to go to the last item here. So last item on the discussion items is item 9B. City manager or city attorney, can you give us an overview?
Yes, very briefly. As I think everyone knows, there has been extensive discussion and even litigation over the waste franchise and differing opinions about the interpretation of the city code regarding the waste franchise. And we were asked at some point to put on hold the consideration of options for clarifying the city code and for considering the future of the waste franchise while settlement discussions occurred. And recently we were asked to bring back the item. There are many options. One option that we were asked to flesh out in greater detail was the option of clarifying the municipal code so that there is no longer confusion about what the process would be, and that the process is, as the City Council had stated in the earlier request for proposals and as had previously stated on a number of occasions, that it is a discretionary process considering numerous factors and not simply a low bid process. And also reaffirming and reawarding the existing contract. And so there is an ordinance attached to your staff report that would accomplish that. There's also a list of many options. It's not an exhaustive list. Really, it may be an exhausting list, but it's not an exhaustive list. The council has a full range of discretion with regard to waste franchises and with regard to the municipal code. So these are some options. You don't need to discuss them all, and you might choose to discuss others that aren't on the list. But this was my attempt to give you kind of the range and give a sense for the community of the broad discretion that the City Council does have.
Great. At this point, what I'd like to do is open it up to the public. If anybody in the public would like to have a public comment on this, I would be more than welcome to engage in that at this point. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring that back to the council. Just to kind of frame this a little bit, so probably the last point of engagement on this has been we spent a lot of time in closed session dealing with a lot of different things that has to do with the trash contract. I think at this point what we're trying to do is basically put the trash contract behind us, fix everything that should have been fixed, and be able to move forward. So with that, what I'd like to do is go ahead and open it up. And if there's any other questions or comments from the rest of the council, who would like to go first?
I have one question before we move forward.
Sure, go ahead.
If I might. It seems like Mr. DeBolt stood up tonight and made an offer or offer for negotiations. Are we entertaining that? Are we disregarding that? I just want to know before we move forward with this where we're going with that offer.
Well, I think at this point that's open for, I mean, there's no predisposed perspective on this council, so if you want to continue down that path, you're more than welcome to do that.
Well, I mean, the goal is to, as you said, not have this last for another 3 years. Is that correct? So why don't we, before we move forward with any of this, discuss the option that we were given tonight? Can we do that?
From my perspective, we can talk about it. Yeah.
Well, you yourself have been doing the negotiations, so I would defer to you because you have had more of a hands-on. I personally have not been privy to any of the closed sessions. So
the only thing that I would probably want to get a little bit of guidance from is that when we went into negotiation settlement, we had specific objective. We went from closed session into the settlement discussions. Those settlement discussions were proprietary, or they were covered under confidentiality.
Right.
So what has happened is Mr. DeBolt has brought forward what a position was in that process. And so with that, I'm not sure confidentiality-wise, how far do we go into discussions that we had in a confidential setting?
Because the agreement with the plaintiffs was that, well, with all parties, was that the discussions would be confidential. You can't discuss what took place in those prior discussions. You can discuss, if you choose to, the offer that was presented tonight, but without any of the background history, because that was all confidential.
Okay. All right. So, from my perspective at this point, I think that maybe what we may have to do is to have a discussion kind of in parts. The staff recommendation is to go back basically through, look at the municipal code, fix the code, reaffirm the contract, and then at that point, looking forward, figure out what we do in the future. As the person that was actually in the settlement discussions going through, I think that there were some specific objectives. So the reason why we went into the settlement discussion, those objectives weren't able to be met in the settlement discussions. The offer that was put forward was one of many offers put forward. And at that point, I would just leave it to the rest of the council. Everybody's more than welcome. They heard the offer, but from my perspective, again, it was just more of the same. And it, to me, was, again, it was rejected in that discussion, and I don't see any value in going forward with it. So I would just go ahead and open it up, and that's my direct feedback. And Jerry, I don't know if you have any more questions on that.
Okay, maybe I can just ask, City Attorney, I'm not an attorney, so if you can clarify the offer that was made tonight. Did I understand that there's 2 appeals? There's an appeal on the individual council members, is that correct, from the citizens, and then there's an appeal from the council or the city on the issue of not complying with the ordinance. Is that correct? Did I say that right? Why don't you say it for me?
There are 2 different appeals, one appeal by the plaintiffs and one appeal by the defendants. The appeal by the plaintiffs relates to the granting of the SLAP motion as to the third cause of action, the 1090 claim. And
why don't you clarify that for the people who are watching? Because while we might be familiar with that terminology, the residents are not.
Thank you. There's a procedure called a SLAP motion, which allows for early disposition of certain kinds of claims before there's been discovery or a trial or many proceedings at all. The 1090 claim or the corruption claim was kicked out at the very beginning of the case based on that early disposition motion called a SLAP motion. The plaintiffs appealed that.
Okay.
If they were to win their appeal, it doesn't mean they would win their claim. It just means they would have the right to proceed to the next steps in the lawsuit. The first cause of action, which was for regarding the interpretation of the municipal code, went forward, and the court found in favor of the plaintiffs that that there was a provision in the code that was unclear and that required the award of the franchise to low bidder in the court's opinion. And so the court issued a decision stating that the franchise agreement is void but would remain in place until further action was taken by the city or an appeal was filed. Appeals have been filed both by Consolidated and by the city, so that decision is on hold and the city's appeal is pending. One thing I want to clarify is that all of the plaintiffs' causes of action sought the same remedy, and the remedy was to void the contract.
So they weren't looking for money, they just wanted to...
Well, they're looking to void the contract and to get attorney's fees. So the
Well, yeah, but I mean, they're not looking for cash, you know.
Right. The settlement offer that is that was proposed is that the contract be voided and they get paid $300,000 in attorney's fees. So it is pretty much all of the relief that was requested in the complaint.
Okay, so the offer that was made tonight, that was to kind of, we'll cancel our appeal if you cancel your appeal, is that right? That's why I'm asking you to clarify, because that's what my perception was of it.
There are procedural steps along the way, which is, yes, canceling appeals, there are certain waivers, the city would waive its right to attorney's fees, the plaintiffs would get their attorney's fees, but the bottom line from this is that the plaintiffs get the relief that they were asking for in the complaint. The contract is voided and they get their attorney's fees. That's what the settlement offers.
Okay, so to me, we had residents that came forward at the last meeting saying, we don't want this to be dragged out any further. We have an opportunity to say, okay, we're gonna take care of what the judge said by remedying it with these decisions here tonight, and we can make all the other stuff that's pending kind of just be canceled out and we can move forward. Is that correct? Is that?
We can't do that unilaterally. Any settlement would require Consolidated to agree. They have
well, they're paying for it, yeah.
No, it's not just that they're paying for it. They have a contract. So they have rights to assert their interest in that contract, and they've done so by filing an appeal. So any settlement has to be a three-way settlement.
Have they been pretty much supportive of what we've wanted to do moving forward from the beginning to this point? Have we worked kind of as a team, I guess is what I'm asking.
I can't comment on settlement discussions. I can tell you my impression from staff is that Consolidated has been a good business partner.
Great.
That's certainly the feedback that
and
we got.
So if we were to move forward with what was offered earlier tonight, it would be at no cost to the city because there was an amendment to the contract saying that any fees or any litigation that would arise from the award of the contract would be paid for by CDS. Is that correct?
If this had been an award by the court, then that would be true. But we don't have the right to settle out from under them and then demand that they pay. So they would have to agree in the context of a settlement.
Right.
If at the end of the day, when all the appeals are done and so on, there's an award of attorney's fees, it would be for Consolidated to pay pursuant to the indemnification. But by settlement, that has to be mutual agreement. That's not the same.
So then before we say no to this, shouldn't we be talking to Consolidated to see how they would like to proceed forward with this offer before we take any kind of stand at all?
I think that's a question for your fellow council members.
Okay. Well, I think that if we had the opportunity to remedy this problem, fix the ordinance pursuant to what you felt was inadequate, I differ on that. But I think that if we have the opportunity to move this forward, we should do so. And we should just definitely discuss this with CDS and see how they feel about it before we say no altogether.
Okay. So do you have any other?
So I guess I'll make a motion that we reach out to CDS, see what their opinion on this is before we make any kind of decision.
Okay, that's the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? No?
No.
Okay. Do you have any other comments?
I'll reserve them till after.
Okay.
Thank you.
Who would like to go next?
I'll go next.
Okay, Councilmember Stevens.
All right. This all stemmed from the first cause of action, and it was just simply the city code wasn't clear. It wasn't defined specifically for this type of an event that happened. This was done by a previous council, and I think we've studied it, reworked it, worked it over and over again to the point where enough, just totally enough. I mean, now it's time to get the ordinance squared away, period. And so that's one of my biggest concerns, is that we're cleaning up something that should have been finished a few years back, or penned correctly a few years back. The other thing that concerns me too is, and it's just a blanket question again, is or are the attorney fees that are being incurred right now being paid for by Consolidated and not by the city of Los Alamitos?
They're being paid by the city of Los Alamitos and being reimbursed by Consolidated, yes.
That's fine. All right. All right. So we're not incurring anything else on there. And, you know, as far as any kind of settlements go, again, this is something that was handled between the attorneys and all the parties involved. But I have to go back to what the city attorney just said. We would not be able to entertain any kind of a settlement because any kind of awards as far as attorney fees or so on would not be in effect because it wasn't a court order, correct?
I'm not sure.
Correct?
I'm not sure how to say it differently. Any settlement would need to be mutual among all the parties.
Correct. Okay. All right. That's all I have.
Great, thank you. Who'd like to go next? Mayor Pro Tem Poe.
Okay. You know, this is like beating a dead horse. And it's really quite a shame, actually. We have spent an awful lot of time on this, and there's been a lot of damage to our community, I feel. I think that it's important for us just to abide by the judge's wishes. Councilmember Stevens stated that an ordinance was put in place and it wasn't complete. And in our staff report, it tells about that, and that there was supposed to be an additional provision. And this was discussed at the regular city council meeting on October 6, 2008, when the ordinance was actually put in, voted on, and put in place. And I find it very interesting that it was a 5-0 vote, and reading through the transcript of that televised meeting, it, in several places, not only did the the acting interim city manager, Dave Rudat, but the attorney at the time, Dean Derleth, both stated in this transcript, and I believe this transcript is online, that it did not mean it would go to the lowest bidder. And it was a 5-0 vote. So, as was explained in our staff report, there was a change in council, there was a change in city attorney, a change in city manager, and the end product of this ordinance was never completed. So it left it very unclear. There's many different ways that have been that this has been interpreted. Being a person on the ad hoc committee for this trash contract, I know that Councilmember Stevens and I, we aren't attorneys. We read it and we kept asking, and I've said this over and over, we asked over and over, are we abiding by the code? And the advice we got was not only from our city manager at the time, but from Sloan Vasquez, the consultant that we hired, and our present city attorney, that we were following the code as it was written. And obviously, we find ourselves where we are today. I think that we really need to put this thing to rest. We have had several meetings where there has been efforts at, bringing this a closure to this with both parties, and they failed. So I think that, as far as I'm concerned, I'm ready to approve the new ordinance, the changes to the ordinance, and the addition of 2.60.130 that should have been there and wasn't, and have us move on.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Cusmano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I studied this as a private citizen. I was at the podium and I spoke out against it because I felt it didn't follow city code. So here we are today, correcting the code, which I had said we weren't following. The city had not been following. And I find it kind of a little bit ironic that we have a city attorney who then said that the ad hoc committee comprised of then Mayor Poe and Mayor Pro Tem Stevens had followed the code. And so now here they're saying it's unclear and we have to fix it. But back then, we were told it was we followed the code and we did everything proper. So I find it to be ironic at best. The part two that I also find ironic was then Mayor Poe had said from the center seat here that we could have changed the code any time. And I just ask, why did we wait if the code was unclear, if the award was made to apparently the second highest bidder in violation or not in accordance with a unclear code. So that part was rather disappointing. The other parts about the negotiations, I did erroneously attempt to recuse myself from that. So there are two closed sessions that I was not a party to. I did ask for the information of which it has been withheld from me. And there is, I guess, a concern that maybe I will not be allowed to go back into a closed session to hear this information. So for the Pete Carvajal, who had asked that I, participate in closed session, I'm going to have to disappoint you because I do not know what happened. The information is being withheld from me. So I just think that, it's unfortunate that we've come to this. We've come a long way and done to everybody, and it's just rather unfortunate. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Any other comments?
Yes, I do. Yes, I did make the statement that we could have changed the code at any time. But what I meant was, we could have negated the code that was in place. At the time that I made that statement, I didn't know that there was supposed to have been an additional code, section 2.60.030. Didn't find out about that until way down the road when we were sued. So when I spoke about the fact that we could change the code, I spoke in terms of the fact that we could have negated the code, the change that had been made in 2008, and just not gone out to bid. We could have done that. I wasn't talking in terms of the section that was left out, because we didn't know about that at that time. So when we were doing the negotiations for this trash contract, at that point in time, I felt, and asked, as I said, asked the question many times, are we following the code? And I felt that we were following the code, because that was the information that was being given to us. So my reference to changing the code was only to the fact that we could have negated, as I said, the going out to bid. Actually, I thought it was a good thing to go out to bid, because when you go out to bid, you have an opportunity to get lower rates, and that's what happened. So I'm sorry, Councilmember Kusamoto, that you misunderstood the comment that I made.
So it sounds like you had a predetermined majority that was able to do something that you kind of said from the dais.
Mayor,
Okay,
go ahead.
so let me just, City Attorney, go ahead. I know you want to make a comment.
Yeah, there's one thing I wanted to clarify, because I guess I took part of that comment a little bit personally, and I want to clarify. I certainly understand the frustration. Everybody involved in the process has been frustrated with this, but I have never at any time said that this code section, as it was written before I arrived at the city, was clear or was well written in the context. This is a phenomenon that, as city attorneys, we encounter all the time, which is code that is not particularly cohesive or well drafted, and we have to make the best interpretation possible. I read the code, I looked at what it said, and said the best, most logical interpretation was that this was not a low bid contract. I confirmed with the city manager that was his understanding. I confirmed with the prior city attorney that that was his understanding. I confirmed with Sloan Vasquez that that was their understanding. In fact, the chosen bidder, Consolidated, and their attorneys were so confident that they were willing to agree to defend and indemnify based on this. It is not as though I said this is crystal clear and there's only one way to read it. It's a matter of looking, as we often have to do, at code in context, trying to understand how it fits with all the parts and pieces of the code. I have said several times, I understand a judge disagreed with me on this. I still think the Court of Appeal would agree. You may never get to that issue. If you resolve the case, that's perfectly fine with me. But I just want to make it clear that this code, in my view, needs to be clarified so that you never have this problem again. And that is not a statement as to who was right or who was wrong in the prior discussions. It's just a statement of fact that it could be clearer. Everybody agrees it could be clearer.
Great, thank you. There's no other comments. I'm going to make a few comments. So,
Mayor, I just want to reserve for after you're done. I'd like
oh,
to.
well, then why don't you go ahead?
Okay, go ahead.
No, that's
I
okay.
just asked that first question, so you go ahead and I'll follow after you.
Go ahead, Jerry, seriously.
Are you sure? Okay, great. Let me just use the phrase that you like to. I'm going to frame this a little bit for you. Back when we addressed the ordinance initially, Councilmember and I, Mayor Edgar and I were both on the council at the time, and the intent of the council was very clear. I know you spoke about the October 6th meeting back in 2008, I believe it was, but if you had gone back one more meeting to September 15th, 2008, it was very clear. The October 6th meeting, there was very little discussion and a vote was taken. If you go back one more meeting, it was discussed in all clarity. There were the 3 things that were discussed. They were to be sealed envelopes. They were to be opened in public, so there would be no room for any kinds of accusations. And it was to go to the lowest responsible bidder. It was to be a competitive bid process. For any of you who question that, please go back to the September 15th, 2008 meeting and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So we fast forward to when the contract comes into play. The bids come in. City manager at the time was Jeff Stewart. I called him, as I do, as many of us do, to speak and ask questions regarding agenda items, whatever. There's an issue with a person in the community that needs some help. And in that conversation, I said, so have you opened the bids? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, did you follow the ordinance? And he's like, what are you talking about? And I said, the ordinance where you have to do it, you have to open them in public. And he said, you know what, let me call you right back. Says he calls, he talks to the city attorney. She says she's fine with the way that it's written and that they didn't violate any code. So I said, well, I'm glad you feel that way. I just hope that moving forward, everyone else does, because as far as I'm concerned, and being that I was part of those discussions, that's not what the intent of the council was. And while Sandra, our city attorney, may have come to the conclusion, it would have been simple enough to take the time to avoid all of this that's happened. It's taken over a year to go back, look at that, verify whether I was right or wrong, and then move forward. If we needed to address the code at that time, the ordinance at that time, to change it because that wasn't what the council wanted any longer, we could have changed it then. But what this was really just going to move past what anybody said and go with what they wanted to do. That brings me to, we award the contract to the second highest bidder. Excuse me for just a moment. So as you can imagine, we've sat in 2008, we've discussed, and it was a 5-0 vote to proceed with the competitive bid process. So we get to where we're going to be awarding the contract. They've been warned multiple times by residents and council members who are saying you're violating the code. They chose to move forward. We award the contract to the second highest bidder. My concern there is it's a hidden tax. Now, you've got consolidated second highest bidder. We're talking to the tune of $6.5 million more over the life of the contract of 10 years. I know we got a little bit of, and I hate to use the word, but kickback money. We're going to get $75,000 a year in tax revenue that, in essence, they were supposed to have a building here where they were going to have an office and run that kind of tax generating revenue through the city. They did not do so, but we're still receiving the money. So I have a little bit of a question about that. I know, Mayor, you didn't have a concern about that, but I do because that's part of the contract. So if you take that $75,000 over the life of the contract, that's $750,000. Is a lot of money, but it's not everything. It's not $6.5 million. Then you get the street sweeper that was valued at about $30,000, $40,000, and they gave us $250,000. So you ask yourself, I mean, logically, why would they do that? It doesn't make any sense. It was to shore up the fact that they wanted to get the contract, and in essence, by increasing the fees, the franchise fees that you are charged, it generates more money for the city to make right the budget that has been in a deficit for several years. I don't believe, one, that we should be raising your taxes without it going to a vote of the people, and two, we shouldn't be doing it behind your back. We should be coming to you and saying, look, we're not capable of managing the city with the revenue that we get. We're not capable enough of making cuts that will bring us within our budget. And it's simple. I'm pretty simple. So you've got your savings account, which is your reserve, which we don't really touch. One-time expenditures for something wonderful for the community. But generally it sits there. And there's a part that's set aside for emergencies if we have a catastrophe, which I thought was brilliant on the part of the council. Then you've got your checking account, let's say. And that's our operating budget. what was happening, and our mayor actually brought it to our attention that we were overspending by initially my first year he was saying $200,000 to $400,000. Then it turned out it was $400,000 I believe the first year, then it was $600,000. We needed to make drastic cuts. But instead of doing what we needed to do, we started formulating these little behind-the-scene deals to make sure that you still feel good about it, but we're going to get that extra money, and we're going to make right our budget off of the residents' backs. And Councilmember Edgar, you spoke about it, I believe, in September 15th and I don't have the exact words, so forgive me if it's not exactly how you would put it, but cost recovery evaluation based on finance or franchise fees. If we can't run this city on the money that we bring in, then we need to make some changes. I know that staff has done a really good job cutting back, but maybe we need to cut more, because we certainly shouldn't be trying to trick you with a contract that costs you $6.5 million more than what you should be paying. Common sense, people, what does that tell you? You need to pay attention to what's going on tonight and be involved in this process. Mayor, I go ahead and pass it on to you with the right to readdress after your comments.
Alrighty. That was a lot.
It was. I tried to say it quick.
I know. So just a little bit of, from my perspective. So tonight, what we're talking about is to fix the municipal code and to clarify the municipal code, to clarify the code that really reaffirms the process that we put into place. I'm looking out into the audience. I see David Moore, and it's warning me. He knows that I'll speak forever about this, and Jerry and I can have a debate that can go on for days. So I'm just going to stick specifically to kind of what we're focused on tonight, which is the municipal code. The municipal code is something that, from a clarification perspective, we went 3 times, had the city attorney say, hey, look, we're unclear. And the city council basically adopted a process 5.0 to evaluate on other competencies within this, price being one of them. At that point, I think the council felt that we really addressed the lowest responsible bid issue, and that's the issue that's, quite frankly, off and evaluated by a judge and now an appeal. What this ordinance does this evening is it clarifies the process that we utilize, and it says, look, you need to be able to utilize this process. You need to determine what a weighting factor is on 5 different categories that have been determined when we were going through this process. It gives the city council legislative capability of readdressing the weighting when we go through this process again, or a future council. So if they don't agree with the weighting factors, they can do just like we did in the future, have a preliminary meeting, evaluate the matrix of weighting factors that would consider stuff like price, financial viability, customer service, et cetera. And at that point, if you feel price was the most important item, then weigh it 100%. If you think customer service is the most important, weigh that 100%. But at the end, you only get 100, so you got to try and factor it out. I think that, so to handle the component of this that deals with the municipal code, I also see in the ordinance that there's a second item in there to really try to make sure that in the future that there's not a problem with this. And this has to do with one of the clauses at the state level. To not get into the details of an appeal, but you've got a process by law that if you have unclear regulations at a lowest level, when there's a lack of clarity, it kind of moves its way up. That's the way it does, whether you're in business through uniform commercial code or at this level, at the city level. What we've tried to do also is put in some of the state wording that says, look, at the end of the day, we can evaluate this, any contract for this, using our weighting factor, or we can utilize a code that says, look, at the end, a majority can go whatever direction they're going to go. And I think what we're trying to do is just to make sure that the city doesn't put itself into being liable in a situation that we're dealing with now. Mayor Pro Tem Poe talked about the community being really at a point of just, they're over this. They really want to move on. So kind of, if we talk about the municipal code, that's what the attempted fix is. when we talk about the second component of this, which is to reaffirm the contract that was in place, utilizing that code, is basically to what had taken place, we're going to codify it into the municipal code and really let that take place. I think from the perspective, if you're up here as one of five, this is an issue that really isn't between us and Consolidated. It's between two different groups in this community. And what has happened is that the company that's caught in the middle is Consolidated. I don't see any reason why at this point that we would want to get and interfere with the process of a code or of a contract that was awarded through a fair process and was given to them, to why we wouldn't just go ahead and let them finish out their 5 years. I would say that a concession point on this, and this is something that I did say, trying to find some common ground, is that I do think that this is a 5-year contract. Their financials were built on this. We don't put vendors into a contract, get into a fight politically, and then penalize them to be able to go through this. So when you sit back and you say, well, God, that settlement, why couldn't we go to something like that? The issue with that is, if you think about it, through that settlement, you basically, it says, accept the municipal code issue. Basically, we'll wipe away the appeal on any of the other stuff, and at that point, pay us. Matter of fact, pay us for doing this. The people that brought this lawsuit on, and this is, depending on who you're talking to, you can say, hey, this is a good governance lawsuit, or you could say this was a political lawsuit. On the political side, what you've got is a real fleecing of a vendor in this city to the tune of over $300,000 to $400,000. If you listen closely to that settlement, you'll hear that, look, drop everything and accept the judge's ruling on the municipal code. But deeper under the accept the ruling on the municipal code is get rid of your current hauler that is invested and went through this whole process with us and was selected. And so as a vendor, basically ask them to go away. Well, this isn't an offer that would have been systematically rejected from our perspective, at least not from mine, one of five. But I would suppose if I was sitting as a vendor, I wouldn't be, if I'm getting sued in this process, I wouldn't be sitting back saying, oh, I accept that, I'll leave. So, it was these types of offers that just, if you play them out logically and you get into the details, and I won't bore you with those, you'll see that they don't end in a way that it actually is a settlement to bring peace to the community. Basically, the one concession that I would say is that this contract was a 5-year contract with a renewable 5 years after. And I think what I would like to see is that we basically remove the 5-year option that's in this. And what I'd like to see is to be able to go and basically put that 5-year option out to bid in this economic environment and get it behind us. Use this code, put this process in place, and go and basically figure out what we're going to do for the next 5 years and get it done and put it behind us so future councils don't have to deal with this trash issue for the next 10 years. Marilyn, I would accept your motion that you made on this to basically kind of go forward. I would ask you if you would accept potentially or under consideration moving into maybe opening up the option, the 5-year option, and considering and putting that out into a bid process and going forward from there.
Why don't we take what you just said as the motion, and I will second it.
Okay.
Okay, and we have a chance to readdress?
Yes, please. Councilmember Mejia.
One of the things that was a little disturbing, if we're going to go back to the award of the contract, each of the haulers had to be graded on different items, as the mayor said. One of the criteria was their finances. Were they financially sound? Were they capable of doing the job? One of the disturbing things to me was that CDS, who is our hauler now, whose parent company is Republic, didn't use their own finances, which were, I'm sure, far less than Republic's, when they were being weighted. So as far as I'm concerned, when we move forward with this process, I'd like to make sure that when CDS comes forward, with their RFP, they use their own financials instead of their parent company, which has, I'm sure, a great deal more money considering, if I'm correct, Republic is the largest trash hauler in the world. So, and that's not an overstatement, I don't believe. I'm not really sure, Mayor, what you were speaking about when you said that the offer tonight was asking the vendor to go away. I did not get that. City Attorney, was that something that Mr. DeBolt was offering as part of the compromise or the negotiation? Did he say anything about the trash hauler would have to go away? I did not hear that. So if he did.
He didn't say that the trash hauler had to go away, but he said that the trash hauler would have to accept the writ, which means that they have to accept the possibility that the city could, as I said before, could exercise its discretion in any number of ways, including not moving forward with their contract.
Right.
So they have to be willing to walk away from the contract in order to accept that
For it to be rebid. Okay, so in essence, they would have to go out to bid. We would have to go out to bid again, and CDS could still, as Mr. Edgar said, come forward with their bid process and tell us what they're going to offer us. But it doesn't by any means say they have to go away. They just have to go through the process the correct way that the ordinance said they should have done it in the first place. And I think that they would be confident in doing that because the majority of this council has consistently said that they like CDS, they appreciate the way things have gone. So I think that's a far stretch, Mayor, that they would have to worry that they would not be rehired as our hauler.
Is that a guarantee? I mean, it sounds pretty certain.
No, I said the perception being that the three of you have supported them, you're the three that put them into the contract now, it's a pretty safe bet.
Oh, okay.
That's just an observation on my part. Obviously, I can't see the future. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'd bet money on it. And, you know, something that the mayor said, it's funny to me when I went to hear the judge's rulings, because not being privy to the information in closed session, I thought as a council member I should do my best to stay up on top of what was happening. I unfortunately did not see any of the other council members there except for Mr. Kuzumoto at the last meeting, or at the last where the hearing was decided as to how things were going to be decided by the judge. But I think there are some things that have been said here tonight that are simply, for a lack of better word, that's silly. I mean, the judge at one of the hearings said, this is not a professional service. This is not like our attorney who is a professional. This is trash hauling. It's been done for decades. The people come, they pick up your trash, they take it away, and they sort it correctly, and that's really the extent of what they do. And I don't mean to be insulting. I am a tradesman myself. My father was. My brothers and sisters, all but one are. I have nothing but respect for the working class. But when we try to say that, let's just say Athens or EDCO, as we spoke earlier, could not do this job to the level that CDS could at such a large inflated rate is merely silly. I mean, Athens is the largest hauler in LA County. I think that if they can handle LA County, they can handle little Los Alamitos. Rainbow was one of them. They handle Huntington Beach, much larger city. To think they could not give us the same service at a lesser cost, it just baffles me that we're playing this game of like hide the pea and let's move these things around. Oh, but look over here, and then they change what you're doing. It's a charade. And so the last thing that I would like to say to you with regards to these ordinances that we're talking about tonight, the changes, I would recommend to the people of Los Alamitos, do not trust the politicians up here with all power, because then there's no guarantee that you're going to get the best bang for your buck. It means that they can decide on whatever criteria they choose to give it to whomever they want. And I'm not even going to go into the political part as you did. That's been stated here before. So I would ask the council to really think about making sure that there are safeguards in here to protect the people of Los Alamitos with regards to our decisions, and not just let us say, well, and I'll quote from the ordinance. The city may consider the cost of personal, professional, or consulting services if the authorized contractor party, i.e. the city council or the city manager as applicable, determines it to be relevant factor under the circumstances. So in essence, what they're saying is they can determine whatever they want to justify their behavior. Be very careful of giving politicians that kind of power. It's not a good idea. Mayor, I'll go ahead and pass it back to you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Stevens.
Yeah, I have to agree. It's a good statement. Don't trust the politicians. This is a ordinance that was penned by politicians, I guess, in 2008 and has to be corrected now. And all of this conversation that's going on is because of mistakes made back a few years ago. We're in the process of trying to correct those and getting the brunt of it. Somebody else sneezed and we caught a cold. Wow. Something wrong with that. All right, the other part of it is too, and I keep hearing these figures coming out, you know, to the residents, and I do want you to watch your trash bills, please, because if I'm not mistaken, we're the second lowest cost in the county for residential. Was that it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Our residents are paying the second lowest cost for trash pickup for residential. Much less than Stanton, much less than the community of Rossmoor, much less than Cypress. But yet we gave you a wrong trash contract, and it's less by a lot, not by just a little. So please, don't believe the politicians. Do the homework yourself on it. Thank you. Wow.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Poe, do you have any other comments?
The only reason that we're correcting this ordinance is because the judge said that it was unclear and that we needed to correct it and to make it clear. This idea that there were shell games and behind-the-door dealings and all of that is just foolishness. We did everything we could to do, to have this process as open and public. The subcommittee met several times with Sloan and Vasquez. That was a consultant. We hired the consultant because we didn't know how to do this. And we needed to have the expertise of some people that did know how to do it. There was no one more surprised than myself that the bottom line came out to be for consolidated. I could care less who picks up our trash. And Jerry's right, it is just trash being picked up. We did what we thought was the very best in going through all of the criteria. Our council voted several times on the weights. We even changed a couple of the parameters. And there was every opportunity for people in the public to come up and speak and say that they wanted to have it changed in all kinds of ways. There was all those opportunities. And so I can't, you just really have to stretch real far. And the fact that I think we all know that this was political. If this had gone to any other trash hauler, it wouldn't have, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about trash right now. We wouldn't have for the past year. It was only because of it being consolidated and because there is a small group of people in this community that think that George Brigham is owner of Consolidated, which he is not. And there is all this angst about George Brigham, and that was even brought up in the transcript that was at that meeting that we discussed in 2008. As Councilmember Stevens said, we have the best trash contract in Orange County. It's not the lowest. Irvine has the lowest because they have an evergreen contract and they will always be lower than anyone else in the county. I've said this before, our past city manager fielded calls from other cities saying, how did you do what you did? The citizens of this community are getting a very, very, very good trash rate. And there's these constant comments about 6.5 million. And yet no one can really tell us what that number really means or where they got that number. I think that it's been, as I said, it's been beat to death. We need to just be done with this. It is all about politics. It's about not only the last election, but the election before that. And that's a shame. It's really too bad. But I think that we just need to move forward.
Great. Councilmember Guzman, do you have anything?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So on what Mayor Pro Tem Poe had said about what the judge said, I was there, and I have the transcripts right here in front of me. And he didn't say that that we had to redo it. He said that was one of the choices. He actually said he was actually able to rule that that the city did not follow the code as he interpreted it and didn't award it to the lowest responsible bidder. And that's what is basically in the transcript. So it wasn't that he said we had to redo it. He did suggest that it be redone to be clarified, but he didn't say that. He said that was one of the choices. And he even looked at the plaintiff's attorney, which was kind of amusing to me, and he said, look, the council, with a majority of 3, can do whatever they want, and they can, they can overturn it. They can just choose to award it. They could re-award, I guess, what's basically happening here tonight, and that's what he told them, and that's kind of, basically said kind of tough cookies to that. Now, to Mayor Pro Tem's asking, a question about the $6.5 million. When I spoke up here as a private citizen, I saw the $6.5 million difference in the 29-page report from Sloan Vasquez, the consultant that Mayor Pro Tem Poe and Councilmember Stevens had been meeting with. So that's where the $6.5 million comes from, and that's just just doing the math, and it's kind of just really easy. You just take everything, multiply by for the 10 years, and do the subtraction, and that's what it is. So I don't know how else to say. That's where I understand the $6.5 million comes from. The other thing, and I know we talked about this, and I do want to revisit this just one more time, and it had to do with I think kind of that hypothetical city attorney about attorney's fees and void contracts. 3 parties have to agree because we could not unilaterally agree to accept the writ. So if there's a 3-party agreement, then of course attorney's fees and indemnification for the individual council members that were so named in the third cause would have to be dispositioned somehow, correct? Meaning assigning of those fees to somebody, to some party, the city, the individuals, or the trash hauler.
I'm not sure I understand your question. I think you're asking me if the city did not prevail in the end and there was an award of attorney's fees against the defendants.
No, okay, so in the case that there's a 3-party agreement to accept the writ.
Yes.
Okay, then it becomes the disposition of the attorney's fees. Who gets what portion, who gets charged with what portion.
Right. Part of that settlement would have to be how the attorney's fees would be paid.
Okay.
Right.
And certainly there are individuals that were named in the third cause that might have some exposure. And that's all I want to say. And back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So, again, we're going to stay focused on the municipal code and going through this. I think that for the public's viewing pleasure, we just had to get it out of our systems one more time, but I think we're there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I've made the motion that we're going to go ahead and accept the municipal code fixes as recommended by staff, or I should say the ordinance number 11-10 by title only, and waive the full reading and agendize the second reading for the adoption for the November 21st meeting.
Sorry, it's ordinance 12-01.
Okay.
There, you have, and I apologize for this because it was a little confusing, because there's an attachment to the staff report that included a prior version of an ordinance. it was a little confusing, but the correct one is the first attachment, which is 12-01.
May I ask a point of clarification of the city attorney?
Yeah, let's make it fairly tight, though, please.
We're on a time schedule. Okay, city attorney, there was a resident that stood up tonight regarding a potential Brown Act violation with regards to some of the decisions that are being addressed here tonight. Do we have any concerns about before we move forward with this?
No, I'm always happy to have the questions, and I will definitely look into it.
Okay.
But none of those questions affect anything that's on the agenda tonight.
Even though these things were decided to move forward in closed session, we're not acting inappropriately by voting on them tonight. That's all I want to be clear on.
Right.
Okay?
Okay. So,
Point of order, Mr.
sure,
Mayor.
go ahead.
Okay, so I don't waive full reading. I want this fully read.
I'd like to have that too, just for the public, because I think it's important that they be informed about what actually is transpiring. They're given just some numbers, and I think that we're doing them a disservice. I would like to also have it read in full.
Okay, so I'll put that out to vote. Who would like a full reading of this ordinance? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, anybody object? Aye.
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 Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go with the,
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
sure, go ahead.
Per our
Councilmember
city
Kuzma.
code 2.04.280, it has to be by unanimous consent to waive full reading.
Okay, city attorney?
It's an unusual provision. Let me check it.
Okay.
Can I get a water? Does anybody mind if I grab a water real quick?
No, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. No, I'll get it. Thank you. Can I get anything for anyone else? Would you like one? Can I get anything for anyone else while I'm back there? Troy,
No,
Carolyn,
thank
anything?
you.
Okay. Lauren, you good?
Fine, thank you.
City manager?
I'm fine. Councilmember Kuzmoto is correct. You have a provision in your municipal code that says you can only waive full reading by unanimous consent. So if you would like, I will read the ordinance.
Please.
Ordinance number 12-01, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Los Alamitos, California, amending sections 8.12.015 and 2.60.130 of the Municipal Code, adding section 2.60.140 to the Municipal Code, and reaffirming and reawarding existing franchises. Whereas the purchasing ordinance of the Los Alamitos Municipal Code is currently silent with regard to procedures for the award of services contracts generally, and whereas the city has historically awarded services contracts based upon multiple factors, including demonstrated competence, qualifications, and suitability for the project in general, and not based solely on cost. And whereas, except in rare circumstances, state law allows for flexibility in the award of service contracts, including allowing for award based upon such factors as demonstrated competence, qualifications, and suitability for the project in general. And whereas the vast majority of cities in California permit the award of services contracts based upon such factors as demonstrated competence, qualifications, and suitability for the project in general, as well as cost. And whereas the reference to the professional services non-public project formal bidding provisions of Chapter 2.60 contained in Section 8.12.015 of the Waste Ordinance has caused considerable debate, disruption, and expense for the city. And whereas the city wishes to eliminate any ambiguity or continuing dispute with regard to the procedure for award of waste franchise agreements and services agreements in general, and to ensure that services contracts may be awarded based upon such factors as demonstrated competence, qualifications, and suitability for the project in general, as well as cost. And whereas this ordinance is not intended to be a change in policy, but is rather declarative of existing policy and practice, and is intended to clarify the language of the municipal code so as to conform to and continue to give effect to the existing policies, practices, and intent. And whereas the city finds and concludes that the existing franchise was awarded in a manner consistent with the policies, practices, and intent expressed herein, and in substantial compliance with the provisions of proposed section 2.60.140 of this ordinance, and provides significant benefit to the community, and wishes to ratify, affirm, approve, and reaward the franchise pursuant to its authority under state law. Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Los Alamitos does ordain as follows. Section 1, Municipal Code Amendment. Section 8.12.015 of the Municipal Code is hereby amended to read as follows. 8.12.015, grant of franchise, contract, permit, or license. In order to protect public health, safety, and well-being, to control the spread of vectors, and to limit sources of air pollution, noise, and traffic within the City Council, by resolution referring to the solid waste enterprise by name, may grant a franchise, contract, permit, or license to one or more solid waste enterprises to make arrangements with generators of solid waste, including recyclable solid wastes, green waste, construction and demolition waste, for the collection, transfer, recycling, composting, and disposal of solid wastes within all or any part of the city in accordance with this chapter. Upon the expiration of any exclusive franchise, contract, permit, or license for the collection, transfer, recycling, composting, and/or disposal of solid waste, the city shall issue a formal request for proposals for the provision of the services covered by the franchise, contract, permit, or license. The request for proposals shall be administered consistent with the non-public project formal bidding provisions for services set forth in Section 2.60.140 of this code, shall be sent to various qualified providers of solid waste services, and all proposals received shall be considered in the granting of a franchise, contract, permit, or license. In addition, and notwithstanding the provisions of Chapter 2.60, all proposals shall be submitted in hard copy, no electronic submissions, in a sealed envelope, and shall be publicly opened at the same time. No exceptions to competitive bidding which may be provided for in Chapter 2.60 of this code shall be utilized, and no exclusive franchise, contract, permit, or license shall be renewed or extended except following the formal request for proposals process described in this chapter. Section 2. Municipal Code Amendment. Section 2.60.130 of the Municipal Code is hereby amended to read as follows. 2.60.130. City Manager Purchasing Authority, informal award of non-public project contracts. A. Exemption for personal, professional, and consulting services. Except as provided in this section and Section 2.60.140, contracts involving the acquisition of personal, professional, consulting, or other services shall not be subject to the terms of this chapter. B. City Manager authority to contract for personal, professional, and consulting services. The City Manager is authorized to contract for personal, professional, and consulting services and to purchase equipment and supplies pursuant to this chapter without prior approval of the City Council when the amount of the contract is less than $10,000 and there exists an unencumbered amount in the fund account against which the expense is to be charged at least equal to the contract cost. Section 3, Municipal Code Amendment. Section 2.60.140 is hereby added to the Municipal Code to provide as follows. 2.60.140, City Council review, formal award of non-public project service contracts. A, personal, professional, and consulting services. The City Council shall review and approve the scope of services prepared for every personal, professional, or consulting services contract of more than $10,000. Contracts for personal, professional, or consulting services shall be awarded to the contractor who will best serve the interests of the city, taking into account the demonstrated competence, qualifications, and suitability for the project in general. The city may consider the cost of personal, professional, or consulting services if the authorized contracting party, i.e. the City Council or City Manager as applicable, determines it to be a relevant factor under the circumstances. B, procedure. Except as provided by ordinance prior to the award pursuant to this section of a contract for services in which cost is to be considered as a factor, a notice inviting bids or request for proposals shall be given to various qualified providers, and all proposals received shall be considered. If the director of the using department certifies that, to the best of his or her knowledge, the service can be obtained only from one vendor or contractor and that no equivalent services are available, the notice inviting formal bids or request for proposals may be sent exclusively to such vendor or contractor. Award of the contract shall be by formal motion, resolution, or ordinance of the City Council within 24 months of receipt of bids. C, proposals and awards in substantial compliance. Proposals received pursuant to a request for proposals process in substantial compliance with the provisions of Section 2.60.140 of this code may be considered by the city and may be the basis for a contract award. Section 4, affirmation and reaward. Pursuant to the city's authority under this code and state law, including but not limited to Article 11, Section 7 of the California Constitution and Public Resources Code Section 40059, and notwithstanding any provisions of Section 8.12.015 or 2.60.030 of this code to the contrary. 1. All proposals received within 24 months prior to the effective date of this ordinance, pursuant to a request for proposals process in substantial compliance with the provisions of Section 2.60.140 of this code may be considered by the city and may be the basis for a contract award. 2, the franchises and contracts approved or awarded within 24 months prior to the effective date of this ordinance for the collection, transfer, recycling, composting, and disposal of solid wastes for the city are hereby ratified, affirmed, approved, and reawarded effective as of the stated effective date of said franchises and contracts. Any other franchise or contract approved or awarded within 24 months prior to the effective date of this ordinance in substantial compliance with the provisions of Section 2.60.140 of this code may be ratified, affirmed, approved, and reawarded by the city effective as of the originally stated effective date of said franchise or contract. 3, for purposes of this Section 4, any failure to comply with the provisions of any other section of this ordinance or Chapter 2.60 shall not constitute noncompliance with Section 2.60.140 or Section 8.12.015. Section 5, severability. The provisions of this ordinance are declared to be severable, and if any section, sentence, clause, or phrase of this ordinance shall for any reason be held to be invalid or unconstitutional, such decision shall not affect the validity of the remaining sections, sentences, clauses, and phrases of this ordinance, but they shall remain in effect, it being the legislative intent that this ordinance shall stand notwithstanding the invalidity of any part. Section 6, inconsistent provisions. Any provision of the Los Alamitos Municipal Code or appendices thereto inconsistent with the provisions of this ordinance to the extent of such inconsistencies and no further is hereby repealed or modified to the extent necessary to affect the provisions of this ordinance. Section 7, certification. The city clerk shall certify as to the passage and adoption of this ordinance and shall cause a summary thereof to be published within 15 days of the adoption and shall post a certified copy of this ordinance, including the vote for and against the same, in the office of the city clerk in accordance with Government Code Section 36933. Passed, approved, and adopted this, it reads 21st day of February 2012. That's presuming that that would be the second reading.
Great, thank you. Question then. Putting this thing out for bid for option for the second year options for year 6 through 10 is outside that ordinance then, correct?
Correct. It's in addition to that ordinance.
Okay. Do we all understand that this action includes the ordinance plus the provision to put this contract out for bid for year 6 through 10? I just want to make sure everybody's okay. Okay.
I'd like to, Mayor, just ask that we do it for the shorter duration as opposed to the long. But we discussed that in the prior dealings with the upcoming new hauler, and we all decided to stick with the earlier and the shorter term, so that way if the economy continues in a downward movement, that we leave ourselves open to go out and rebid and maybe get a lower cost for our residents after that first 5 years.
Okay, Councilmember Stevens.
Isn't that what you just said?
I'm sorry, I thought you said 6 to 10.
Well, it's year 6, and this is a 5-year contract that we're currently in, so it's year 6 through 10. But yeah,
clarification.
I apologize.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Alrighty, does that mean you're going to support it, Jerry? Or
no, I'm not.
I didn't think so. Anyway, so
you are clear.
I know. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose?
No.
No, and I'd like it noted for the record that again, this is not a professional service contract, and so I still believe that these changes don't address the issue.
Okay, great. Thank you. We're going to go ahead and move on to item number 10, Mayor and Council-initiated business, council announcements. I'm going to start, Councilmember Kusumoto, sir, and you're in, we'll work over.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome.
I attended the Senior Club volunteer luncheon last week, and it was a very delightful time. Sat with a bunch of lively folks, and I tell you, they're out there and they're having fun, and I can't wait to get there myself. So thank you, Corey, for inviting me. It was always a pleasure. And, you know, I guess, you know, anybody who has folks that are at home and need something to do, the club's over there, and they do a lot. So by all means, please check it out. Let's see. The other thing is, I do want to mention that February is Black History Month, and there is a proclamation that came out of President Obama. But just kind of in essence, this year's theme is Black women in American culture and history, and invites us to pay special tribute to the role of African American women who have played a part in shaping the character of our nation, often in the face of both racial and gender discrimination. So, you know, if you want to look it up, I'm sure you can Google this, but it is Black History Month, and I think it's just one of those wonderful things that we do to celebrate the diversity in our nation, our state, and our city and our communities. So there's that out there. And I think, Mr. Mayor, that's all I have. Back to you.
Great, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Poe.
Thank you. On January 18th, I attended the retirement ceremony out at the Joint Forces Training Base of Colonel Lisa Costanza. Oh my goodness. This, I'm going to say young lady that retired. When I read, before I went, when I read everything that she had done in her 30 years in the military, it was mind-boggling. And then when I got to meet her, I have a picture of her. She is the cutest thing you ever wanted to meet. Just the bubbliest personality. You can see why she went as far as she did. The place was packed. There were people that came from out of state to come to her retirement. What a joy to see this caliber of person in our military. And I told her, she lives right here in Long Beach, and I said, boy, I think we're going to get you involved in our community now that you're retired. Her last command was in Iraq, and she did retire at Colonel Lisa Costanza. It was just a wonderful, wonderful event, and boy, what a person. Just made you so proud to be there in her presence. On January the 27th, I also attended the Senior Club Volunteer Lunch, and yes, they are a kind of wild and rowdy group. They have an awful lot of fun, and I just want to thank our staff for the work that they do with the Senior Club. And it's important for all of us to get people in the community to understand that the Senior Club is there, well, there's senior meals every day during the week at the youth center. And then the Senior Club is on Thursday. And the people that go to it, they plan, everything is around Thursday. That's the whole day. And they just have such a good time. So if there's anyone out there that, like Councilmember Kuzumoto said, anyone out there that's, 55 or over, you need to go check it out because they have a lot of fun there. On February 1st, I had the pleasure of attending the Cypress State of the City. Mayor Doug Bailey did a wonderful job. And I would like to announce, and in fact, I would like Stephen to talk a little bit about this, about the first general plan outreach on March 8th. I think we need to get some advertisement out there starting now.
Thank you, Madam Council Member, Mayor Pro Tem. We're excited about some of the upcoming dates we have for the general plan. At first, we started off with we're going to do a one-day Saturday, but we decided to extend that into a Thursday, a Saturday, and a Tuesday. The Thursday, we are actually going out to the public, and we're going to have an event at St. Isidore to bring in the crowd from the food truck event. That'll be the first event. The second event will be Saturday, the 17th of March. And the third event will be, and that'll be an all-day tabletop session where parties can drop in throughout the day and participate in different segments of the general plan in different parts of the community center here at adjacent to City Hall. They'll be breaking out into smaller groups, one with recreation, one traffic, one noise, one air. For different concerns you may have about the different community, you have different opportunities to interact with these different topics. And then the final event will be those people that wouldn't be able to go to either of those events will be on a Tuesday night. We tried to offer some variety for people that are stuck in schedules, especially this time of year. So March is our breakout session of 3 different events, 3 different days. Check out the website, losalgeneralplan.org. And if you have any questions, email me, and we will be doing, as soon as the race on the base ends and those banners and flyers come down, ours will go up. So you'll see our large banners in 3 different locations throughout the city. You'll see window banners in businesses. You'll see emails going out with instant messages out to the people that we already have on our list, and we're combining with recreation. You'll see in the recreation and guide, you'll see a full-page ad and a full-page pullout as well in that. So we are saturating the market for March in order to get the best saturation we can to get input from the general plan before it's packaged up and formalized before it goes to the Planning Commission and the City Council for any consideration in the future.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mayor Powell, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Stephen, on that, on the outreach, is it possible, if the staff time permits it, that you might create a standard, maybe a quarter of a page kind of thing that we can carry around, that as we meet members of the public, we can hand them to them and invite them to this thing?
Absolutely.
And so if you put it in our mailboxes, that'd be great. Then
We'll give you a half-page ad. We'll give you a full-page ad.
I think a quarter page would be the right size. That'd be something to carry in the pocket and then hand out to anybody that might talk about it, or we might encounter in the going about in the community. If you would, please.
As soon as we get them back from the printer, we will make sure we prepare the City Council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We all met a couple of meetings ago, Wink Chase and Patty Laird, and we're happy to give them a commendation. And in our weekly memo, there's a discussion about neighbor for neighbor is what this is being called. And I was wondering, and it was Wink and Patty who created this, and I was wondering if there's any plans to do this in any of the other neighborhoods.
That's actually a program that we certainly endorse. Wink and Patty it's their program. They're kind of running with it, but I know they're eager. So I think if there are other neighborhoods that are interested in that, I am most certainly certain that Wink and Patty would love to introduce that program to them.
Well, we have several residential areas in our community, and of course the Highlands is a very large one, but right close there, or maybe equivalent, is Carrier Row and New Dutch. And we've had different neighborhood type events over the years, neighborhood watch, so on and so forth. And I know that we at one time attempted to get a block captain for each block. And I know that I recall that Tanya Hubert, who lives on Howard, or excuse me, on Midway, was one of them for that area. And I would really like to see us work with, if Wink and Patty are doing this, and see if they'd be interested in coming into Carrier Row, because I think that anytime we can get our neighborhoods together and instruct them. We have a lot of new people that have moved in there, and then just reaffirming to the residents that have been there for a while all the safety things that they need to know about. I would really like to see us do that. And of course, go on into the Greenbrook area, all of the different residential areas, suburbia, so on and so forth, because it's very important for all of us. We take for granted, I think, or we kind of are blasé about the fact that we're in earthquake country. And you just never know when that's going to happen. But it isn't just for earthquakes. It's all kinds of things that we all need to know who our neighbors are, know where we can go to each neighbor if there's a catastrophe of any kind. And I just think that kind of communication is great to have in all the residential areas.
Marilyn, if I may add to that, I contacted Lincoln Patty some time ago regarding Carrier Row. I have not met with them to implement their program, but as I've spoken from the dais several times, I've already started the groundwork in Carrier Row, and so I'm hoping to transition that over with their program so that we have a consistency throughout the community, as you said, instead of just each different neighborhood handling it different. So that's why I asked them to come, and I asked for the council to give them a commendation, because it's a great amount of effort. Trying to do it by myself has been exhausting, but now that we have this new group out there that works cohesively together through CERT, it'll make it a lot easier. But I think that the work that I've done prior to this will match up nicely with what they're already doing. So I'm glad you were bringing that up. I appreciate that.
I have a couple of other things I would like to have the Traffic Commission consider. And I know that there's probably some people out in the community that are going to say, oh my gosh, she's lost her mind. But traffic is the thing that we hear about the most. And I can't tell you how many people talk to me about the traffic on Farquhar and the traffic in the apartment area. I think everyone in the community finds their shortcuts as the way to maneuver through the community. And as most of you know, I'm involved with the museum, so I use Green and Howard I alternate. I don't want to, wear out one street and not have equal opportunity to the other. And there is never a time on either one of those streets that there aren't cars fully parked on both sides of the street. So that as a moving car, the safest thing to do if there's no oncoming traffic is to drive down the center of the street. It is just not a wide enough street to have parked cars on both sides and have 2 lanes of traffic without it being, I really feel it's a safety issue. When another car comes, both cars have to slow down. You just have to really watch to see that you're not going to hit one of these parked cars. So I would like for the Traffic Commission and our engineer to just take a look at one way on Green and Howard. One street going east and one street going west. You would have slant parking on one side only, and that would leave the rest of the street. Now, I realize that a lot of people would then have to park their cars in the garages, but that's where their cars are supposed to be parked. We all are guilty of using our garages for storage, but if we get in the practice of using our garage for a car, I just think it would be a lot safer. There's issues at the 4 corners of each cross street. Some of them have 4-way stops, some do not. It's confusing, especially to a person that isn't familiar with the community. And I defy anybody not to come to a complete stop at each one, either Green or Howard, at each one of those intersections. In the past years, there's been a little talk about it, but I think it needs to really have a good discussion. And the other thing is looking at adding a 3rd lane on Farquhar. There are areas in our community that do not have parkways, and I just think it needs to be looked at. We hear so much about the traffic piling up on Farquhar, and I know the commercial area that's closest to the boulevard, the sidewalk is huge there on both sides. So I just think we need to do something to take a look at remedying some of the traffic problems that we have in the community. So I'd appreciate it if you would forward those 2 suggestions. And they may come back as futile, but I think that it would be a good idea to look at it. And with that, I think I'm done.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Stevens?
Marilyn, I don't think you're crazy. I think you're creative. I never thought of that. And just the idea, I live on Howard, so I never thought of just possibly looking into a study of making them one way and having the opposing street going the other way. It's definitely unique. I got a question for Corey. Corey, how are we doing on race on the base?
Thank you, Councilmember Stevens. We were doing very well. We were actually pounding the pavement this weekend out at the Surf City Marathon and getting the word out to the public through face-to-face interaction. Currently, as of today, we are at 2,140 registrations. Last year at this time, we were at 1,807. So we are up by 333 registrations overall.
Fantastic. That's great. And I think that's going to keep going to the last minute, too. So, again, I'm hoping we have great weather, not like we had 2 years ago. Whoa. All right. All right. In the past couple of weeks, I had a budget and finance meeting with the Orange County Fire Authority, and then followed by a director's meeting, both of them lasting many hours. And I thought we put in a lot of hours up here on the council. And the biggest topic that we're going through is bringing Santa Ana onto the Orange County Fire Authority. And it's time. Santa Ana is in some, I guess, has a concern if they're going to be able to make it. And so by consolidating Santa Ana Fire Services onto the Orange County Fire Authority, it's a big boom for the Orange County Fire Authority. And it looks to me like what we've come out of on a few of our commissions, that it's a possibility of holding costs, too, at the same time. And that's always a concern for all of us without sacrificing service in any way. And so that's going to continue on. I would ask Angie to do something for me. It was mentioned in the last meeting, the funding from the Aquatic Foundation. Is there any way of agendizing possibly, or bringing it up to where we can have establish an ad hoc committee and start figuring the best use of the funds from the Aquatic Committee or Commission?
Definitely. We had already planned to put that on the next agenda.
Ah, great. Okay. Well, then that stops that. Last thing is Valentine's Day is coming up on the 14th. Don't forget it. If you're married, don't forget it. If you're involved in a relationship, don't forget it. Otherwise, you're going to be in trouble. That's all I have.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Mejia.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to start with, I know that we have taken some action with regards to the alleys and speed bumps, and I have had residents come forward that did attend the Traffic Commission meeting that live in the apartments who asked for something a little more substantial to be placed there instead of those small speed bumps. If that's not a possibility for us, then I'd like to ask that we put more than just 2 speed bumps, because what happens is you put it towards the beginning of the alley, there's a big area in which for them to pick up speed, and then another speed bump, and then another short part of the alley. The reason I ask this is because as I was leaving a neighbor's and coming around the fence, I was almost run over by a speeding car. So I'm not so concerned for myself, but there are children that live in those apartments, and the only place they have to play are on those back parking pads. We have a little pocket park, but there's no bathroom. So for many people, they can't take their small children there because either they're not potty trained or they're concerned that they won't make it home in time. And besides, it's very small and doesn't hold a lot of kids. So I would like to ask that, not taking it back to the Traffic Commission, they've already done theirs, but I would like for the council to agendize for us to decide to further protect the children of the apartments by looking at the cost and see if it's cost effective for us to put those in. I know we put up some signs, but really, in all honesty, those signs don't do a whole lot of good. With regards to the one-way street, yes, it has been addressed, and I will say, as someone who lives in the apartments, I would differ with Councilmember Stevens. The parking there is so impacted that if you were to take away half of the parking and try and force people to park in their garages, it's just not going to happen. And I think for us as government to try and tell people how they should be living, that's not our role. I think that maybe there are some issues with what's happening in Apartment Row, but I don't know that the answer is a one-way street. I know it's been talked about before, but certainly not with just parking on one side. So I'd like to ask that before we go forward with sending that to the Traffic Commission, that we discuss it as a council in a little bit more detail, give some people the opportunity to come here before we have staff look into it and do all the extra work. I think that it's something we need to address here before we send it on to the Traffic Commission. That's what I'd like to ask to have happen. I spoke with Commander Susan Russell with some ideas that we're thinking about for over at the base, and I'm looking forward to meeting with her. when we get a little bit closer to any kind of fruition where we can share those ideas with you, happy to do so. And would like to thank the community for taking the time, if you're still watching, for watching these meetings and staying involved, and for all the kind those of you who have approached me and asked for my help, and we as a council have been able to help you. It's just, it couldn't be a better job than to help your neighbors. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it on to you, Mayor.
Great, thank you. Orange County Sanitation District, a lot of meetings there. Rivers and Mountains Conservancy, Angie, they canceled the meeting that they were going to have in January. The most pressing item, obviously, is the Coyote Creek Park project. If we get an opportunity, what I'd like to do is make sure that we have a discussion with them this week. I didn't have a chance last week to follow up with them. The biggest item is that we need to start to position a request for an extension on that grant money. And if you have an update, that'd be great.
I signed a letter on Thursday, authored by Dave Hunt, to the RMC, the new executive director, asking for that extension.
Good, thank you. January 25th, had the honor to go over to the VA hospital, and basically they had a dedication ceremony for the Robert Soltis Center for the Blind. And I would just encourage anybody in the community, if you have an opportunity to get out there to the VA hospital. It's not the VA hospital that you used to see back in the 80s and 90s, especially in the 80s when I got out. It looks like a modern hospital, has great, I mean, they have just added so much to that hospital. If people are interested in getting a tour, you can go over there and they'll give you a tour not only of the center, but of the significant amount of improvements that have went in over there. I'd like to thank Isabel Duff, who's the director that manages the VA hospital Long Beach. Just for everything that she does in coordinating with us. We come across her, every member of this council comes across Ms. Duff up over at the base. She's actively involved in, so between what happens at the base here, Joint Forces Training Base, Seal Beach Naval Station, and the VA hospital, this council consistently gets involved, and it was great to see a great project. Robert Soltis is a major that was in the Army. He was actually killed in an IUD accident. He's one of the first ophthalmologists or somebody in that field that was killed, and he, you know, so they basically had his family come and they dedicated that building to his honor. I also had a great opportunity at the seniors volunteer lunch. I don't know if rowdy is even another way to describe it. You know, that's one of the funnest events that I go to every year. All the council members go, and you know, it's an opportunity. You know, when you've got voters there that not only are from Los Al, but they're from Rossmoor, they're from Seal Beach, they're from Garden Grove, they're from Cypress, and they really don't care how politically correct they are in telling you exactly how they feel. So you get a lot of direct feedback. And you get a lot of joking, you know, stuff. It was just a really good time. The one thing I would want to highlight about that senior lunch, though, that I thought was really neat, you know, this city council 5-0 voted Angie Avery as the city manager. And, you know, again, just as another affirmation that if there's any question that was the right decision, go to that senior lunch and you sit back. We've all sat in the seat, and you sit back and you watch. Angie's actually sitting next to me, actually eating. You know, we got Corey up there running around like a madman, trying to make sure everything goes good, and kind of running the show. You got Emmeline and Mackenzie. You got everybody in the staff. Everybody's moved up a notch, and you've got a great senior event with almost 80 folks that are there. Corey's running the show. The boss is sitting back calmly. I think she at least looked that way to me, and it was just a show. You know, when we made the decision for city manager, she had developed a team that can actually step up, that got promoted through this process, and I, you know, got to just visibly see the promotion in progress. We took a few minutes while we were there at the senior lunch to recognize Angie, and you know, it was interesting is that talk about a group that knows our Parks and Rec, you know, setup. They were so excited for Angie. They were so excited for Corey. I mean, it was really a victory lap for our Parks and Recreation Department in an unexpected place. And I just goes out to everybody up here on the council. Again, just a great decision, I believe, by the council. The community is definitely getting the value of that decision. And Angie, I just, again, to you and your team, thank you. Other items, I've had an opportunity to go out to the base for the promotion of Lieutenant, he's now Lieutenant Colonel Mayhew. Great guy. And, again, as an ex-military guy, the interesting part was they had one of the head generals come down from the California State National Guard. And this guy definitely knew Lieutenant Colonel Mayhew, and he actually, the general had served under Mayhew's dad. So there was a lot of camaraderie going on, a lot more than what you'd see at a Navy promotion. And it was really, really good. It was a great event to go to, and again, attended by the normal, city council folks from Cypress, Seal Beach, Los Al, et cetera. You had, Isabel from the VA hospital, a lot of VA folks out there. We had the firefighters that are actually out on the base that serve out there. And it was just a great event. Last Friday, had an opportunity to go to the chamber breakfast. The chamber breakfast, again, not to be too self-promoting for our city, but we have a new addition in our city, and it was celebrated on Friday. And that is that we have an addition of the Cancer Surgical Breast Center with Dr. Jessica Rehanabad. Dr. Rehanabad is a household name at Los Al Medical Center with many generations of doctors in that family that provide great support to this community. Dr. Rehanabad, notwithstanding that she did some of her residency at UCLA, which we know that could have been a better decision, she's still a very, she's recognized in the, across the nation as being one of the best breast center surgeons. And, it was interesting is that that Chamber of Commerce is really starting to pick up steam. I've watched that thing when we would have an installation dinner at a yearly installation at the Grand, and it would be hundreds of people. And then I've watched over the years as the economy got tougher, the business people started focusing more on trying to stay focused on work and surviving. And as the economy is starting to pick up, people are finding their way back into the chamber, and the chamber is definitely starting to thrive. I walked in, barely made it on time, and it was hard to find a seat, and it was wall to wall. I would say that John Osborne, the new president of the Chambers, is doing a great job as he's taken over from Judy Clabeau. And I would tell you that Judy has a firm hand on trying to mentor and make sure that John toes the line. So, and that's an interesting dynamic to watch. Cypress, state of the city, I'd have to go with Mayor Pro Tem Poe. Doug Bailey, the mayor of Cypress, just did an outstanding job. Another event that they actually stopped serving the food inside the room. There was over 330 people at that. In the past, I think we've had a little bit of relationship of, years past of a lot of challenges as Cypress and Los Al have kind of grown and matured together through the 50-year history. It's really good to sit in the audience, watch the mayor of Cypress talk about the accomplishments that they've done, and sitting in our seat and just having a real appreciation of some of the longer-term strategic decisions that they made, where they faced a lot of folks in the community that didn't always agree with the direction that they took on the transactions, but now are reaping the benefits financially, and a very sound city. And I just want to say thanks to the city of Cypress and their city council and their leadership and their city management for doing just such a great job and inviting us over to their state of the city, and I was honored to be there and to see what a great job they were doing. I guess the item with the agendizing the CIP projects for the pool, that is one that we had talked about. So that'll be coming back. I was hoping that we would be able to get that done and some of the economic development items that we've been talking about as we get ready to prepare for the budget cycle coming. And I know that that's going to be a really busy time. Those are the only comments that I have at this point. But I have a couple more comments coming from the council members. Yes.
I just have one.
Sure, go ahead.
One request. Wanted to ask for something to be agendized.
Absolutely.
There's a member of the community, Jody Schloss, that stood up, and she's delivered this letter with regards to her belief that there was a Brown Act violation. I'd like to have agendized for the next meeting, and the reason I say the next meeting is because these are very serious matters. If we could investigate to see if there was, if so, do the research as to, what remedies there are, and ask for the city attorney to get a recommendation back to the council.
Okay. So every council member up here has the opportunity to add an item on the agenda, so that will happen. Go ahead, Councilmember Stevens.
Yeah, it's a point of clarification. A few minutes ago, Councilmember Mejia stated that as far as the one-way traffic and elimination of parking, she disagreed with me for Apartment Row. Well, I agree. I disagree with that statement. So nothing was said about eliminating any parking at all in Apartment Row, and not by me. And I thought it was very creative to think that possibly you could go one direction on those streets, and I look forward to the Traffic Commission following up on that.
Alrighty, and since that item wasn't agendized and we're not going to take a vote on it tonight, we're going to keep, but that'll be a good one. So any other comments? Okay.
So, I'm sorry, Mayor Edgar. I do have a question. So procedurally, so when there are these Brown Act violations or the appearance of, what do we do? I mean, I prepared a statement that I've got that I want to distribute to everybody, and again, I'd like to have that agendized to be looked into as well. As far as Brown Act violations.
You have every right to agendize what you want. Do you want to ask a specific question to the city attorney?
No, I have it written down here. I don't like to verbalize too much. I do want to make sure it's all written down, and therefore it's not any questions as to what it is. So there were, I think, 2 instances that I certainly would like to have looked into and addressed, and we'll just pass this out to the council proper and city manager and city attorney.